Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back. Today I am so excited. I am joined by one of my very dear friends, Jaclyn of the company Frazier, Lynn. Jaclyn and I met in Charleston last September at the Mastermind Retreat. And I have not told Jaclyn this, but I knew there was a jewelry designer there. And I wasn't sure who exactly it was because I didn't have a chance to research people ahead of time. And I remember seeing this girl sitting in her house in Charleston with all these beautiful bracelets on. And anyways, wondering if that was the designer, and it was. So Jaclyn, I'm so glad that you're here. Can you tell me a little bit about your business and how you got started?
Sure. Thanks, Paige, for having me. That's such a sweet compliment that you noticed them, because I think that is like, I don't know, whenever I notice something on somebody, I always make a comment because you never know, like if they could be the designer or they know someone. So my business is Frazier, Lynn, and I make costume jewelry, and it's a little bit more upscale than normal costume jewelry. And I got started by first in college. I was a PR major, and I was working at a local boutique in Augusta, Georgia, where I'm from. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee now on the mountain, so that's kind of fun. And so I was working at a local boutique, and I was a buyer for the boutique, and I just was really frustrated with the costume jewelry available for smaller stores to buy. So you could either get really inexpensive things or really expensive things that were similar in price to fine jewelry. And so my desire to start making my own jewelry kind of happened then, because I could find a lot of supplies online. A lot of things that were high quality that were available to smaller boutiques were very like boho in style, so beaded things, nothing that was like a preppier aesthetic. And so I started making my own jewelry, and then I kind of, once I saw the back end of how wholesaling works as a buyer, I thought, I could really do this. So that's when the idea to start Frazier Lynn really started. And my husband had started a cycling apparel company. We were just dating at the time. And so I really got an insight into the back end of manufacturing. And that really inspired me as well. And so I learned a lot from his company, and then also kind of got the guts to go out on my own after watching him do it. So
I think that's incredible. And I love hearing that you recognized that gap in the market, and it was kind of, you bridged the gap between what you enjoyed doing, what you're interested in, and a true need that you saw. I think that's the recipe for any strong business. Okay, so I know from talking just in our personal conversations, I love the name behind Frazier Lynn, partly, I guess, because my middle name is Lynn. So,
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
But would you mind telling us a little bit about how you named your business?
Yes. Okay. So my business is called Frazier Lynn, and Frazier is my maiden name. And we didn't have any sons in our family. It was just my sister and I. And so I knew that if I did something, like started my own business, I wanted to use Frazier in the name to kind of carry on the legacy for my father. And then Lynn comes from, my name's Jaclyn and my sister's name's Caitlin. And so the last few letters of our name to represent our sisterhood. And we've always been really close, only kids in the family, and we're 2 years apart, 3 grades apart. So we did everything together in high school. And then my logo is a strawberry and a diamond kind of combined. And that is, Frazier means strawberry in French. And so it's a Scottish word, but the root is French. And then Lynn, with my sister and I's like sisterhood, is our sorority in college was both 80 Pi, and their symbol is a diamond. And so I wanted to kind of do like an homage to that.
Right. I absolutely love that. And I've told Jaclyn this before as well. I love not only that you created something new, a new name. It's not just your name, but there's true creativity behind it and true meaning behind it. But also just from a legal perspective, I can't help but love that it is, it's not just a made up word that somebody could come along and steal as easily. Maybe it's, I love that it's more of a personal name like that.
And we've talked about this before too, is that I didn't want to give my company my name,
Right.
because then, if it sells or whatever the grand plans are with the company, when I have other employees, that they really feel like that they can give their heart and soul to it. And then it's not just my name on the product, it's the company's name. And it's separate from myself. So that way, I can feel free to do other things and not always be tied to it. I think it's important to kind of make it its own living, breathing thing.
Exactly. I think that's such a prudent decision. I truly do. And Jaclyn and I have talked about this, but like, you think of people like Kate Spade who end up selling their company and then selling the rights to their name, which obviously we're talking about. There's probably a lot of financial reasons for doing that, but I can't imagine. I mean, that would be a huge decision to have to make. And just like you said, I think it's neat to kind of create the company as its own independent being where people can really feel invested in that, not just like they're working into Jaclyn's company.
Right. And talking about Kate Spade is, I told Paige this before, is that the How I Built This podcast with Guy Raz, he interviews Kate and Andy Spade, her husband, and she started a new brand since selling Kate Spade, and I think it's called Frances Valentine. And she actually added Frances Valentine legally to her name because she wanted it to be. Oh, I didn't tell you about that? Yeah, it's just an interesting thing because she felt like Kate Spade was the company. And so she actually is like Kate or Catherine, I think Frances Valentine Spade now legally, which is really unique that she changed her name for a new business endeavor. So
that's a dedication, to say that. Okay, well, so moving into more about your business itself. So shameless plug, I'm wearing one of Jaclyn's pieces right now. And I gifted quite a few of your pieces to family members and friends of mine this past Christmas. And I'll never forget when my sister opened up the box, the immediate first reaction was, oh my gosh, I love it, that the design is so unique. And for me, maybe this is me limiting my own creativity, but I think that jewelry design, more so than quite a few other creative endeavors, is probably very, very hard to stay original in, especially when we're talking about something like, just, I don't know what style you would call the bracelet, but just talking about a bracelet, it seems like, well, there's only so many ways to go about it. So would you mind telling me just a little bit about how, well, one, how you came up with your signature design in the first place, and two, how you strive to stay original in it?
I think that is so important. And that was one thing when I started my business that I really, really wanted to drive home, was that things were unique. They didn't look like anything else, and that I could have brand recognition. So how I started was I decided I was going to make a signature setting, and it's on the bracelet, as you can see there. And I have it like separate there. I don't know if you can see.
And I'm going to post a link so that we can.
Okay, cool. And this is a big one that you can kind of see. And so I wanted to create the signature setting in different sizes and use that with my jewelry, because so often people are using the same settings and pre-made things that they find online, and then everything kind of looks the same. And so I knew that getting your stones cut to a unique shape was more cost intensive than having the metal cast in a unique shape. And so it's based on, all my stones are oval so far, and it's based on my engagement ring, which you can see there, which, similar to Princess Diana's. Mine was actually older than Princess Diana's.
Okay. The true trendsetter.
Yeah. In 1910, from Russia. So, cool. Thanks. And I love the design of it. Anyway, and so it just has a halo setting, but I wanted something a little bit more unique. And so that's when I did like the graduated size of the rhinestones around, and then kind of did a gap in it as well. And so that really makes it stand out, very recognizable. And so staying unique, going back to even in the Bible, in Ecclesiastes, where it says nothing is new under the sun. And that was written in BC. I think we've had a lot of time, since then, and still back then, nothing was new under the sun. And so you do have to accept that, but there's ways to kind of get around that and to stay as unique as possible. And like I said, having things cast for yourself and having things made that other people can't just go online and buy is a
Right.
really good stepping stone. But also working around creativity, to me, creativity is only as good as its parameters. So for instance, on Instagram, your creativity is a square. Well, now it's a little bit different shape, but it was before.
Right.
And so that's what you base all your creativity around. Same thing with Twitter. It was 140 characters. You know, that's what your, now it might be longer, I don't know. But that's what you base your creativity around. So same thing with jewelry is your medium. And so there's only so many things that you can do, but by getting things that are repetitive, like the setting or stone shape or stone type material,
Right.
you can really kind of like brand yourself in that way.
Right. And like you said, it creates an identifiable signature look that people start associating with you specifically, which not only is great from a brand recognition standpoint, but again, I think just in maintaining your identity and independence as a brand itself. So moving forward a little bit more than that, also, I think Jaclyn and I have had quite a few conversations about this, where we are in industries that aren't entirely, they're not entirely saturated yet. There are only so many people doing what I'm doing. There's only so many people doing what Jaclyn's doing. And like you talked about, just filling you're fine. Like you talked about, just truly filling a gap in the market. And with that, I think that's a pretty brave step to take, but that can also make, it can make the competition kind of stiff, because you have quite a few eyes watching you and watching you very, very closely. And it's not like, I mean, I like to say, I hope this doesn't sound bad, but it's not like we're one of another, 50,000 wedding photographers in the world. Not that photographers can't create original work, but there's so many, it almost kind of lessens the feeling of competition, I feel like. Whereas when you're in a more specific niche, like we might find ourselves, again, like I said, you can have truly watchful eyes watching you. So with that being said, would you mind sharing a little bit about some of the hurdles that you've had to overcome just in terms of kind of carving out your place in your niche, staying original, and dealing with those watchful eyes?
Okay, that's a good question. And it kind of, I'll backtrack to before I even started my business. And I was just making my own jewelry. And I had a small following on Instagram from working at the boutique. I would post outfits. So I kind of accidentally fell into fashion blogging for a while, because I was like posting things that we had at the store.
Right.
And then people were calling to order it and things like that. So that kind of started then. So I it was right when Instagram was sort of getting to that place before you like to know it and monetizing and everything. And so I was getting all these followers, and I had about or even more followers than some small jewelry designers that were just starting.
Right.
And so, I was getting as much engagement and stuff like that. And so I had, different people following me and paying attention to what I was doing. And when I started making my own jewelry, I got some attention from a designer who thought that it was similar in style. And that was just very disheartening at first, because when you're not even in business, and someone, you're just playing around with things. And so I got an email originally, to an email that I didn't even check, really. It was like my blog email, from a designer who had been watching me and kind of thought that I was veering into their territory, and sent me a letter about, that I needed to take all these pictures down of things that I had created, and calling me a fraud, telling me that I was, getting fame or something off of their brand or something like that. And it just really was disheartening, because it was someone that I had looked up to in the industry. And it was just made me think, okay, so can I not do anything? Like, is all design kind of off of it. And like I was talking about with the parameters before, is that you have to create your own parameters for yourself when it's not like a social media. And so like with paint, you know, you just have your canvas and you can push the paint around with the colors. And if you limit yourself to colors or you limit yourself to settings, then that gives you the parameters to be creative and be your most creative. And I find that you can be more creative once you say, okay, well, this is off limits if, you know, that person thinks that. So my response to dealing with that situation is a lawyer. And so I was able to immediately have legal counsel, and I wouldn't have sought legal counsel, but they were already seeking that route, and I wasn't even in business. And so I think that, you know, if you have a connection to a lawyer, then that's great. But also people are generally more reasonable if you talk to them face to face. So if we would have lived in the same city or something like that, or even if I would have felt comfortable calling them, I think that, you know, there's a way to do it. One, don't post about it. This is the first time I've ever really talked about it. Paige is one of the few people that I've shared this story with, just because it was so...
I forced you to talk about it.
Well, it was just very, it happens to a lot more people than I think that people talk about. And it might be embarrassing because you think, oh, did I do something wrong? When legally I didn't do anything wrong at all. And it, you know, it's a weird situation, but there's ways to deal with it. And I also think that there's ways to approach it. So for instance, going forward, if I find someone who's making something similar to myself, I think that there's a level of education that should first be the first step rather than like cease and desist. So I'm not saying you shouldn't protect your work, because you should, but you should know, one, is your work even protectable? You know, is it a trend versus something super original? And so that's the weird thing in fashion too, is in apparel and in jewelry, is you have trends, and so you can't really protect that. You can't protect like a tassel earring, you just can't. And so you can't, you know, but there are things that you can protect. So education, so educating that person. And I think that we all have learned in any sort of creative field, talking mine specifically with art and jewelry and painting, is that you first copy the greats, like you're painting Van Gogh. And so you do learn by mimicking things that are kind of already out there. And so figuring out, you know, you obviously don't start a business with that, but kind of figuring out where that line is, and you know, educating someone who may be copying you versus attacking them with a cease and desist.
Exactly. I think you brought up, and this is why I asked Jaclyn to talk to me about this today, even though I know it was a big ask for me to have you talk about it. But this is exactly why I wanted you to be the person that I talked to about this, because one, Jaclyn, you brought up quite a few absolutely great points that I want to expand on a little bit more. But she's brought up, I think, the most fundamental point that we need to talk about here, which is, I know it can be very, very difficult. There's a lot of emotions wrapped up when you think somebody's copying you. But just like how you started this story, I think it's important to not automatically assume that that's exactly what's going on. Somebody a lot smarter than me told me that the role of the artist is to look around them and almost act as a translator for what they see. So if you're looking at the same, if you're influenced by some of the same things, whether that's trends in jewelry, what have you, it's only natural that there will be some sort of overlap. Of course, we're like splitting hairs here talking about originality and copying. And from a legal perspective, I understand that completely. But the reason why I wanted to talk to Jaclyn about this is because she did exactly what I would have told her to do, but she just did it because she knew it was the right thing to do. And that is, one, she stayed classy and gracious throughout the whole thing. The point that I want to drive home is that Jaclyn did not go, she did not go on any sort of public outlet. I mean, I don't know how long ago this happened. It was a while ago though.
Like
So lots of time
4 years
passed before she's talked about it. Yeah. She didn't immediately go on Instagram and start complaining about it. She didn't immediately like write a blog post and start complaining about it. She kept it to herself. And this is something, I mean, there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in when you're accused of something like that, especially when you're accused of copying and it's something that you've poured so much heart and soul into and truly tried to create something original. And I know that we can relate to this, but one of those emotions is just vulnerability. Just like you said, you start to kind of second guess yourself and you start to wonder if you should even be putting your work out there in the world.
Right.
If this is what's going to happen. And if the people around you are just going to try to like stamp you out before you even have a chance to get started. There's a lot of surprising emotions that go into it, I think. But I think what Jaclyn did, or I know what Jaclyn did, is exactly what I would tell somebody to do in the same situation. Stay quiet, stay gracious with it, respond in a polite manner to begin with. If things escalate too much, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a lawyer, but if things escalate too much, then seek legal counsel, because there's no point in dragging yourself through all of the emotional turmoil that surrounds these types of issues without some sort of help. On the flip side, I think that what you talked about is also very important. If you think that somebody's work too closely reflects your own, you owe it. I think as an artist, you owe it to the person to just reach out initially and reach out with a friendly hand at first, especially if it's somebody just starting out. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as competition or anything like that, but I'm saying that I think as a creative community, we owe it to each other to try to be gracious as our first reflex. Educate them. Most of the times I see this happen. The person doesn't know that they've done something wrong and they will immediately change it.
Right.
I think just above anything, it's important to know that we shouldn't, it doesn't need to be a public conversation. It does not. And it's very disheartening to see this happen.
Well, and I think too, not only does it not need to be public, but it also doesn't have to be a bad conversation.
Exactly.
You know, like you said, there are a lot of emotions that go into it, whether you're being accused of copying or you see someone who's copied you. You know, there are so many emotions. So I think like the first thing you should do is not do anything, you know, take a day. Nothing's going to really change in a day, and think about how to approach the situation, how to respond to the situation. Because when you're so heated, you know, just like when you're fighting with a spouse or a friend, you don't want to rattle off things too soon, especially when those things could have legal consequences later. Exactly. So, you know, taking time and not even like, you know, like you said, it doesn't have to be public and it doesn't have to be a bad conversation. You can still be kind either way, and you'll attract more flies with honey.
That's exactly right. And I think that's just in closing, that's the point that I want to drive home is be as gracious as you can throughout that tough scenario. But more than that, focus on what matters. And what matters is creating true, honest work. Honest meaning comes from your heart. It's it's something that just comes from you, not from anybody around you. And that's what I love about your story is I met Jaclyn looking up to her as the girl with all of the pretty jewelry on, then found out she was the designer, then have seen her business absolutely explode in the last couple of months, I feel like. Anyways, and then later on hear that she underwent this really, really, really trying ordeal when she started, and she didn't let it get her down. And I think that's the point that I want people to walk away with, is that even though some of this stuff happens in business, it's hard. It's not what we got into business to deal with. Just kind of put your head down and keep doing the work. That's something my grandpa used to tell me all the time is horses wear, like, you know, you'll see those horses wear the blinkers. They'll say, or they're not called that. He'd say, put your blinkers on and just do the work. So
And I think also just staying above reproach. And so that's like, why it's like, okay, I'm going to make my own setting. And so, to do everything you can, like I said, give yourself parameters. I truly believe that you're most creative when you restrain things, because you can do anything in the world. And then once you kind of whittle that down, then you can create something that you never would have done before. So definitely above reproach is my number one thing. If you feel like that something is even too on trend, and so then you're not unique. So staying unique and figuring out, does this look like anything that's out there? So
yeah, well, Jaclyn, I just really appreciate you being here and talking about this today. I know that me asking Jaclyn to chat with me about one of the worst parts of owning a business bright and early in the morning was a big ask, and I really appreciate it. And I believe in my heart that this conversation will help other people. And shameless plug, I just have to tell people that Jaclyn has just opened up quite a few new designs with her business. She has quite a few new earring designs and different bracelet designs and necklaces now. And so if you are looking for any sort of personal jewelry that is it's one of a kind and classic jewelry, I want to just shamelessly tell you to go check out Frazier Lynn.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much. And if anyone deals with this situation, feel free to contact me. I don't mind talking to people about something similar because, and I feel like I've gone through both. I've had people copy me and I've been accused of copying other people. So I think that, any side of the story that you're on, feel free to reach out to me. I always like talking to people about business. So I'm there.
I really look up to you as a business owner for how
you're so kind.
All of this. So just like she said, if this is something you've gone through, I would encourage you to reach out to Jaclyn. So, all right, Jaclyn, thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks, Paige.